time after the last one. I guess just what was your process after suffering that first UFC setback?
Yeah, man. I mean, just gotta reassess and see what went wrong. Like, feel like you know you do the same thing after a win too, right? See what you can improve on, but it's how much do you want to dive into that? You know, you can write it off to being like, well, I won 14 minutes of that fight and just made a couple bad decisions at the end and a couple things went wrong. So if I just don't do those, then I'll be fine next time and I beat that guy 9 times out of 10. Or we can do what we did, where it's like, look, it's probably the symptom of a much larger problem that we didn't recognize as much. How do we dive into that and figure out where we can get the most growth? And that's what we did. So the last 9 months, has it been? Last 9-10 months have just been focused on improvement and growth and getting back in here to be the most confident version of myself and most prepared for the fight that I could possibly be.
And did you have any opportunities to come back earlier, or did you always feel like whenever they come back to Canada at some point in the back half of the year, that would be when you would return?
No, I was supposed to fight in July. So I was supposed to fight on the Denver card, and then I got injured quite badly, almost exactly a month out from the fight. And I was like, well, I've put in a lot of work. Like, I don't want to waste this work. I think I can go out there and still have I can still go out there and win, but this is going to affect my performance. I was kind of stressing about it for about a week, and then kind of fate interjected a little bit, and I was maybe being a bit too stubborn to pull out, but my opponent ended up pulling out of the fight, and my manager's like, yeah, Sean's going to look for a new guy for you next week after the pay-per-view or after whatever big card it was. And I messaged my coaches, and they're like, this might be a sign, buddy. This might be a good time for you to, you're not pulling out of a fight. You don't have a fight right now. You don't have an opponent. Like, maybe now's the time to pull back. The fight's this fight's happening in November. Just heal up and be ready for November, which worked out really well. Feel great right now.
This card is kind of the beginning of a new era a little bit with the change in rule set, the 12-6 elbows being legal, and the change to the definition of the ground of opponent. Did you train that at all? Is it in your mindset knowing that certain things are now available that weren't there before?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, keeping things in mind, especially like getting up off the ground or snapping guys down in different positions. The knees to the head's probably the biggest one. Dude, it's a fight in a cage. I'm not overthinking it as far as like each individual rule, though.
If you could, because I know you're an analyst a little bit now too, you've done some great work. If you could vote for the next rule change in MMA, what would it be?
That's a great question. I would love for there to be some sort of rule around missing weight. I think that's kind of one of the bigger issues in MMA is guys getting away with missing weight and then being like, oh yeah, sorry, I missed by 4 pounds. Like, it's not enough to call a fight off, but now I'm going to be 30 pounds heavier come fight night. I think there should be some sort of rule in that, whether it be a secondary weigh-in when you arrive to the venue or something and having to be at a certain weight. I think something like that could benefit the sport.
Mike, right here, right.
But again, good question.
When you talk about going from Gilbert Urbina to Trevin Giles, I mean, was there any disappointment that you couldn't hang on to that Urbina fight? And is that a fight you'd like to get back on the books at some point moving forward?
No and no. Gilbert Urbina's a solid fighter. I thought it was a good stylistic matchup, and I think I would have had a great performance against him. I think I'm going to have a great performance against Giles. To be honest, for me, it's never really been about who's across the cage from me. Of course, I study my opponent a little bit, and my coaches study them a lot. But this is really just about my journey, and kind of I think about it a little bit in a selfish way, I guess. But that's how I think I'm going to get the most out of myself. And so, yeah, it doesn't really matter to me who's across the cage from me so long as I can perform.
Is the silver lining that you do get the fight in Canada again, since we're in Edmonton, so you back-to-back fights in Canada?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, obviously it would have been nice to have fought in July, a fight I prepared for, but I'd much rather pull out of a fight in Denver than a fight in Edmonton. I'm excited to get back in front of those Canadian fans.
You mentioned the rule change potentially for weight misses, and that's something that different promotions do differently. I know some promotions overseas do, it'll be a no contest if the person who missed weight wins. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that, especially with some of the bigger weight misses. We've seen a few this year where someone's missed weight by like 10 pounds.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like, I mean, Jazz's opponent for her last fight, not her last fight, the one in Toronto, missed by 10 pounds. which I didn't think that fight was going to happen. Like when I heard her opponent was going to be 10 pounds over, I'm like, okay, obviously this isn't happening. Yeah, I don't have a great answer for you or a full template laid out as to what we should do or what the sport should do, but I think it's just a good conversation to keep having and, try to do what we can to resolve it.
And last one for me, just kind of a fun one. You posted something after Shara Bullet pulled off that double spinning back elbow. You said, do I have to start training this in the gym? Is there any kind of fun move that you do in the gym that you've never hit in a fight?
There's a ton of fun moves I like to do that I haven't hit in fights. Hopefully I pull out a couple of them this time.
You gonna give us a hint on what one of those are?
Hell no, bro.
Fair enough. Best of luck.
Mike, back here.
What's up, buddy?
What's up, bro? I just want to know how you've dealt specifically with the criticism, right? Because I feel like you were brought up as like a big prospect in the 170-pound division. You go and what happened in the last fight, but you specifically, I feel like, got a lot of extra criticism on that loss. People the term fraud check gets thrown around in MMA ridiculously now, you know what I mean? Neil Magny's a guy that just fought Michael Morales. Now he's headlining against Carlos Prates, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with the criticism that comes from like the MMA community and things like that?
I'll be honest, it was surprising at first. I assumed there'd be some negative, criticism, but man, I was blown away by how many people were I guess waiting for me to fall. But also on the opposite side too, like we could focus on that all day. There's a ton of negativity you can focus on, but there was also a ton of positivity. A ton of people messaged me and were like, look, man, you obviously showed some great stuff in that fight. You were winning the majority of the fight. It's not like I got steamrolled for 15 minutes, and we have to rethink my entire game. Again, I think I win that fight most times. We run that fight back however many times. I think I win the vast majority of those fights. And I think I showed some solid skills in that fight, but also showed some things that need to be improved. And, we've just focused on what needs to be improved the last 8-9 months, whatever. Honestly, yeah, again, at first it was a little bit surprising, and it got to me for the first week or two. I was really down on myself about it a little bit. But once I was able to get back in the gym and I think actually take steps toward making improvements and resolving issues, that kind of took care of itself.
And then Canadian MMA as a whole right now, I mean, to be brutally honest, we're not doing the greatest, right? We didn't have the greatest night in Toronto. We didn't get a win on Contender Series. We got a big redemption weekend coming up this weekend. I think there's 8 or 9 Canadians on this card. What are we doing wrong right now?
All I can do is speak for myself, and I feel like my team and I are doing a lot of things right. I've mentioned this week. One of the tougher things to say to yourself after a loss is, man, I really did give that everything I had as far as camp and everything. It's not like I slacked off, and I need to really start taking this seriously. I've been taking this seriously from the get-go. So it's almost tough to think okay, well then what the hell do you have to do? I just have to get back on the horse and reassess stuff with my coaches, and we found things this camp that I haven't been doing or that we're tweaking to get much better results. I can't speak to the entire community. I can't speak to the entire roster of Canadian fighters, but a year ago, we were having the exact opposite conversation. It's man, we steamrolled everybody in Vancouver. We cleaned house. Canadian MMA is at an all-time high, minus George St. Pierre. And now a year later, it's all recency bias. It's your last fight, right? So it's you go on it, you win a fight or two or a couple fights, and it's oh, this guy might be the next, or this country might be the next big thing. And then you have a couple tough fights, and everyone's oh man, you guys suck. You guys need to go get a day job. All right, man. It's losses happen in this sport, man. It's a tough sport, and it's brutal when it happens, man.
And then as far as the prospects in this division, because 170 pounds is probably one of the best divisions in MMA right now. We got, guys like Ian Gary, Brian Battle, Prates, Della Maddalena, Buckley. I know you're focusing on what's in front of you this weekend, but when you see all those names and hear all those names, that's got to get you excited, right?
You said it. I'm focused on me right now. I'm focused on this fight. I'm not focused on the division. I don't have to fight the entire division right now. I've got one fight in front of me, and I'm just taking it one step at a time, and I feel really proud of the work that we put in. I've done some of the hardest things I've ever done in a practice room. This training camp, I had multiple sessions where I'm fuck, dude, do I really want to get up there and do this next week again? Like, do I want to have to do this thing again next week? Do I want to have to do this again in a couple days? This is so unbelievably difficult. But after having survived that camp, like, I feel really good right now. It's weird to say coming off a loss that I feel the most confident I've ever felt, but I really do. I mean, I felt really confident going into my last fight and came up short, but again, showed some really good moments. Like, I had a lot of success in that fight, and at the very end, some horrible, it goes about as bad as it can in the last minute and a half. So we focused on how to make sure that never happens again. So that hole is sealed. I still have all the stuff that was great that I showed in the fight before that, and I've made improvements in just my game all the way around. And yeah, after just putting myself through the gauntlet, this training camp, I just feel like really confident and ready. My coaches have even been saying it this week. They're like, you don't feel like calm as in like, oh, okay, I'm calm and I'm like meditative and at peace. I just feel ready. Like, I'm energetic and I feel good. My weight's good. And yeah, I had a good training session last night, and I'm proud of the work we've been doing, man. I'm ready to do this.
And then the last one, are we going to make sure that security has secured the barriers this time around?
Yeah, man, we gotta. Yeah, that was a funny thing to have happen, man. Like, it's cool. They did I forget what the program was for, but they put out some like UFC advertisement. It was like all these moments, like first champion from Contender Series and Ultimate Fighter and all this stuff. And then it cut to me like having the gate fall on me, and it's Dana being like, "And a gate fucking fell on a guy today." And I'm like, "Oh man, that's what I'm gonna leave behind in MMA, the first guy to have a gate and a bunch of fans fall on him." But yeah, just kind of a funny thing that, because it worked out, it's funny. Had it not, that would have been brutal. But yeah, it's cool because it worked out.
Right here, Mike. Obviously, wins and losses come with great lessons. Off of that Neil Magny loss, obviously, you spoke about being confident, the fight going so well, and obviously, things happened the way they happened. What was the biggest lesson that you've taken from that fight?
I've taken a lot of lessons from that fight. I'm going to be selfish, and I'm going to keep a lot of those to myself within my camp. I think the closer I can keep some cards to the chest at times, the better. But again, I'm really confident going into this fight because I feel like we've done a really good job of sealing the holes that were, that led to the loss at the end of the fight. And some of them were like, okay, different decisions, just make quick different decisions. And some are, how do we prepare for a fight differently, and how do we come at a fight? Man, I just feel so much more confident knowing that I've covered those bases.
When you're kind of visualizing how the fight is going to go on Saturday night, without giving obviously too much away, how do you feel it's going to go?
Just that, man. Just get the hands raised. Just go out there and have a great performance. I'm pumped to hear the Canadian fans chant and cheer. Pumped to be behind that curtain as we walk out and hear whoever it is with the headset, like, all right, you're walking in 3, 2. And you go and you just hear Fat Lip by Sum 41 come on, and a bunch of Canadian fans cheer. And you hear the kind of quiet roar from the backstage as you walk out past that curtain. It goes from like a quiet roar to just screaming fans right in your face, and you hear that echo from being inside the arena. Yeah, I don't care how I get this win. I just want to go out there and perform the way that I know I can, and I'm confident I'm going to go out there and have the best performance of my career.
You mentioned Sum 41 there. They're doing their farewell tour. Are you going to try and see them before they pack it in?
Yeah, man, that'd be sick. I'd love to go.
Do you think they'll be back? I mean, we talk about MMA retirements all the time. So how about Sum 41? They're announcing this as their farewell tour. Do you think maybe they'll come back again?
I mean, I hope so, right? Like, sometimes these guys just need a break, man. You've been on tour for 20 years, however long. And, yeah, maybe you take a few years off, but you miss that roar of the stage and roar of the fans. Like, hopefully they'll come back again, but who knows?
Last one from me. Win on Saturday night. Do you think that trusts you into a position where you can go and start taking on the rankings in the welterweight division again? Obviously, would you like another crack at Neil Magny? Or do you have eyes on anybody else in the top 15?
Again, I'm not thinking past Saturday, man. I got a tough guy in front of me, a guy I know I can beat. I know I can cover him anywhere in this fight, but I can't screw around. This is a dangerous guy. You don't get 7 wins in the UFC by accident. Like, this guy's a solid fighter. So I'm just focused on going out there and having a great performance and being proud of the work I put in.
Thank you.
Mike, you mentioned a guy you can beat. Obviously, you grappled with Trevin Giles a couple of years ago, got the victory there. How much does that just sort of not way into preparation, but give you that added confidence of, I've already felt this guy. I know what his strength is. I know I can beat him in one facet, and I'm confident everywhere. Does that just change sort of the focus and intensity of camp a little bit?
It definitely doesn't change the intensity. I guess having competed against somebody could change the focus a little bit, like where we'd be looking to take a fight. The biggest thing, like you said, is what's a guy going to feel like when you grab a hold of him? What's a guy going to feel like when he stands in front of you? So MMA and grappling are very different, but I've had the privilege to grab a hold of this guy and feel him. And he's a strong guy. He's a welterweight. He feels like a welterweight. I didn't grab a hold of him and want to get out of there. And I was able to get the better of him in the grappling match. So I'm confident if we tie up in this fight, or when we tie up in this fight and it goes to the ground, I'm going to get the better of him there. And I'm confident that I'm going to get the better of this guy in the striking as well. Like, again, I'm a well-rounded fighter. I think I'm dangerous everywhere. I check chins and chase chokes, man. So I think anywhere this fight goes, I can do well.